Hi everyone, welcome to TinkerCAD Basics. My name is Andrea and I'm a Digital Services Librarian at Richmond Public Library. So for this program, I'm going to show you the absolute basics of how to use TinkerCAD. And while we're doing that, I'm going to show you some fun little designs you can do with those absolute basics. And TinkerCAD is a really great software. It's through Autodesk, which also runs Fusion, which is a little bit more advanced, but TinkerCAD is a really great software for anyone who wants to get started with 3D modeling. As you can see, you have the absolute most basic shapes that you can build some pretty amazing designs with. But we're just going to keep it really simple today, and especially for this first session, we're just going to do an introduction to the work plane, some navigation techniques, the basic shapes you can find to make your designs and how to make those a little bit more unique while you're editing them, grouping, and then we're going to talk about how you figure out the most basic shapes in everyday life. So let's get started. Alright, so you can see here we just have an empty work plane. So for TinkerCAD, you will need to create an account. Once you've done that with your email address, you'll be able to create a new design. And when you open up your new design, this is what you're going to see. So, as you can see, it just says work plane on the bottom here. We have a grid, and you can edit this. So snap grid is set to 1 millimeter right now. I'm just going to show you what happens when you change it. So it's 1 millimeter. As you can see, it'll snap to that grid. If I increase it to 5, we can see that it snaps to the 5 grid. And so what I'm doing right now is I am holding the right key on the mouse down and moving my mouse around. So that's moving my work plane so I can look at it. The other thing you can use is this cube right here. You can move this around. It moves a little bit faster. And then you can click top, back, bottom, and that gives you a much more square look at those different sides. And if you want to go back to the original way it looked when you first opened up this project, you can just click on home view and it'll reset. So that'll just be the little house right here. And this is only if you would have a lot of different designs on your work plane, so you can hit fit all in view. For this project and everything we're going to be working on, you probably won't be needing to use that. We also have the zoom in and zoom out buttons. You can also use the plus and minus keys or the scroller on your mouse. And this is going to flip it to a flat view. Again, you probably won't need this. This is only when you get a little bit more advanced. And just a couple other things to look at before we start. So what I'm most excited about, this is a brand new feature, is the Collaborate tool. So you can see right at the top here, we have a invite people to design with you. And you can copy this link and send it over an instant message or email. And whoever you send it to will be able to open this up and design with you. And since you're going to be designing together, you can also add notes in different spots. And this is going to be if you can see them or not, which is really exciting. And you can just add notes with the notes. And then on the side here, we can see all of our basic shapes. And for this program, we're probably just going to be sticking with this. But if you want to look more, we have the text and numbers. We have characters, if you wanted to build something. We have some cool printable designs from the Smithsonian. You can print out a dinosaur. Or a skeleton. But we're just going to stick with the basic shapes today. So what I'm going to show you today is how to design a pig and a bunny using the absolute most basic shapes you can find in your TinkerCAD shape library. So to get your shapes out onto the work plane, you can either click and drag them, or you can click on your design and click down again. So how about we start off with our pig? So the thing to keep in mind with 3D modeling is if you want to 3D print them, you're going to have to look at the shapes you're using and how well they will print. So for our pig, we want it to have some legs on the front and the back pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a box and reshape these. So you can see I'm using these grips on the sides of your shapes. And when I change them, it changes the numbers. So this is going to be in millimeters. And I want this to be a circle. So if I want to uniformly size everything up or down, I can hit Shift and increase the size that way. But because I want my shapes to be a rectangle, I can't uniformly size them up and down. And the next thing I want to do is copy and paste. So what I just did there is I hit Control C and V, and I'm copying and pasting my shape. The other thing you can do is you can just click on it and use the duplicate and repeat or the copy at the top. So I want these to be a little bit wider. So that I have space to put my hooves, my toes for my pig. And the next thing I'm going to do is pull out the roof here. And the next thing you can do with your shapes is you can actually flip them. So you can see when you use these little rotating arrows, it'll pull up this compass and a degree that you are changing this by. So if I wanted to write in a number, I can click on this and then click on the number. Let's say I want to go 90. So I can do it that way if I know exactly what I want to do with it. I can also click and drag. So the outer line here you can see has a lot more little lines, and I can do this a lot more precisely. If I go into the interior, this will go up by 22.5 degrees every time I move it. And I'm going to move this up to the work plane using this arrow on top, so I can move this up and down. And I'm going to resize this again. Alright, so it's a little bit too big. And the next thing I want to do with this is I want to turn it into a hole. So we can see here that our shape is right now a solid. If you drop down this, it'll show you all the colors. You can also make it transparent if you'd like. But what I want to do is I want to make this a hole, because when I do that, and group the shapes, I get a cutout of that triangle. So I'm gonna just ungroup this for a second. So what I did here is, when you group things, you also need to select them all together. So when I click on this and I click on this, you can see that switch the shapes. So when you're grouping, just make sure you hold down Shift and select all of your shapes. All right, and I'm gonna copy and paste that again. And since we're going to use this same design for both the front and the back, I'm going to select everything. So there's two ways to select more than one shape. You can either do my shift click, which is good if you only have a couple things to select, but the other thing you can do is you can click with the left key on your mouse and draw a box, and everything in that box will be selected. So now I'm going to group these and then copy and paste. All right, so now we have the face of the pig and we have the back of the pig. So let's start by doing the back. This is going to be very, very simple. We're going to grab the scribble tool right here. So you can see it's a little bit of a squiggle, but when I click and drag that onto my work plane, I will get this. So I'm actually able to draw a shape. So we're going to make the curly Q of the pig's tail. You can see I have my drawing right here, and this will show the preview of what I just made on the work plane. If you want to erase a small part of it, you can click on the eraser. If you want to erase a bunch of it, you can click on the draw shape, and that works the same for drawing as well. But since I don't want a solid shape for this, I want to keep my curly Q. I'm just going to hit confirm, and I have my shape now. So you can resize this like anything else in your design. And if I want to move, so you can see this is great if you want to just move around the same axis point, but I want to move to a different part of my work plane. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the shift key again and hold down the right key on my mouse and just move my mouse. So I'm going to do that. And I'm just going to resize this a little bit so it looks a little bit more like a tail. And that looks good for the tail. All right, so that is the back part of our pig. I'm just going to group that together. The other thing you can do if you want to see all of the pieces of your design is you can go in here, you can change the color itself, or you can select multicolor, and that'll keep the original colors of your design if you just want to keep track of the shapes that you're using. So let's move on to our pig's face. So as we know, the pig has a snout, it has eyes, and it has some ears. So if I'm thinking about the snout of a pig, that might be an oval with a couple more circles cut out of it for its nostrils. So what I'm going to use is the cylinder again. I'm going to drop that into the middle of my pig's face. And I want this to stick up from the pig's face just a little bit, maybe a couple millimeters. And then I want this to be an oval rather than a circle. So I'm not going to uniformly resize. I'm just going to pull this across and make an oval there. All right, that looks pretty good. And the nice thing with the box and cylinder shapes is they actually already have a default hole that we can just pull out and stick onto our design. So for our snout, we actually just want to make sure that this isn't fully on the build plane. We want to just pull it up with that arrow. So we just get a couple millimeters cut out. And we can copy and paste that. It'll be in the exact same spot. And that looks pretty good for our nose. So we can select all that and group them. So now we have our little nose. And now we're going to put in some eyes. So you can either do a cutout again, or you can have your eyes stick out a little bit. So I'm going to use the sphere because I want my eyes to stick out. And I'm going to make this small, 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 small. Pull that up to 5, which is the height of our shape right now. And then I'm going to push that back in. So it doesn't look like a circle just popping out. It looks like a little rounding when we print it. I'm going to move that over like that. Right, and that looks pretty good. All right, so let's move on to our ears. So we could use a semicircle for the ears and just pull them so they look a little bit longer, like a pig's ear. So for that, I'm going to use the rounded roof. I'm going to do the same thing again, where I move this, move it up, and resize it a little bit. So it looks a little bit more like an ear. And I also want this to be a couple millimeters shorter than my head shape. So when we put these together, you can see it's a little bit further down than the head. That just adds a little bit of dimension to our design. So now I'm going to copy and paste that. All right, so that looks good. And so we can print this out like this and just glue them together once we've printed them out. Or we can add a middle piece and we can just resize this to be the size of our pig's body and make it a little bit shorter. So we can glue all of those pieces together. The only thing to keep in mind with these kind of shapes is you could have done all of these and put them together, like I'm going to do right now. Oops, need to group that. You can see here when I'm moving it up and down, there's a number changing. And this shows where you are on the build plane, so I want this to be at 0. So I can put these two together. Just like that. Or I can add this middle piece in. And glue all of those pieces together. Now the easiest way to probably do this would be once you've decided on the shape and size you want your pig to be, you could copy and paste that and then just make it a little bit taller. As you can see, see once you've done that, it can be a little bit difficult to get the right size and shape. That would kind of be your idea of what it would look like printed. So that's going to be our first design. Let's just get these all back to flat. So we have our little undo and redo keys right at the top here. We can go all the way back to having these flat on the work plane. And I'm just going to move these over to the corner so we can work on our bunny. So the bunny is also going to be based on our cylinder. So I'm just going to make it a little bit skinnier and taller. Now the cool thing with these shapes is you can actually change the design of the shape as well to make it exactly what you need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the size so it looks a little bit more round and less like a bunch of pieces put together. And then I can also change how many segments it has. So I can make this very round, and I can add a little bit of a bevel so you can see that it's just the rounding of the top and the bottom. And I want to have that for my bunny so it looks a little bit more natural. Then what I'm going to use is, so for our bunny we need ears, eyes, a nose, maybe some feet. So let's start with the feet. Now I'm going to use this little half sphere right here. So I can pull this out. That looks a little bit like a bunny's foot, right? Make this a little bit more flat. A little bit too long for the size of our bunny in this design. Push that back. That looks a little bit like a bunny's foot. So I'm going to copy and paste that. Might need to be a little bit smaller. Alright, that looks pretty good. And we also need a tail for our bunny. So let's pull out the sphere, shrink this down, and just stick it on the back like that. And there's our bunny tail. Now for the ears, I'm going to use the round roof again. But if you have a better idea for the ears, you can definitely use that too, and be sure to share your final designs with us. So I'm going to pull out the roof here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it really long. So you can see that looks a little bit like a bunny ear. Make that thin. And rotate that. Move it all the way to the top of my bunny's head. I'm just going to copy and paste that again so I get the exact same shape. Rotate that 180 degrees. And I have two mirror images of my ears. It's a little bit thinner. Alright, and there is our bunny ears. So let's work on our bunny's face. So just to show the difference between our sticking out eyes, I'm also going to do these eyes cut out of the bunny's head. So we're just going to use our sphere here and turn that into a hole. Sometimes when your shapes get really small, you do have to click off them to move them. And that is a little bit too big for our bunny. Alright, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to copy and paste that and move it to the other side here. And we're going to shift and click this and the body and group those. Alright, Alright, so you can see we have our bunny eyes cut out now. And now we're going to make the nose and mouth. So you can do both if you'd like, but I'm just going to stick with the mouth right now. And the thing to think about a bunny is, what does its teeth look like? Because it does have the bunny teeth, so it can bite things. So I'm just going to use a square to make the teeth on this one. Make that a little bit shorter. And I'm going to move that up onto the bunny's face. Once you have it on, you might find you need to resize it a little bit again. There we go, there's our bunny's face. So you could also add arms to your bunny if you'd like. And you can let us know what shape you use for that. And that is our bunny and our pig. Okay, so the very last thing I want to do with you is I want to show you how to export these so you can 3D print them. Because as you may have heard, we are going to be starting 3D printing again very, very soon. So I want to make sure that you know how to export this and put it into Cura, which is the slicing software that we use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the export. So you can export everything in the design. And the thing to keep in mind if you export everything in the design is it will stay in this formation or whatever you have your shapes arranged in. Once you've moved it into the slicing software, you won't be able to change the position of these designs. So let's just do this one at a time, because there are some things, some different settings that you'll need for each of these. The bunny's going to need some supports. So I'm going to export this, and it's going to show only the selected 7 shapes. And I'm going to download this as an STL. And then for my pig, I'm going to click and drag and select everything in the pig and export that again. I'm going to save my files and open them up in Cura. Alright, so I have Cura open now. So to open up my designs, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on the folder right here. And this will open up my downloads. So let's start with our bunny. So what I need for the bunny is I need supports for my ears. Well, actually I don't need any supports. So if you have an overhang of over 50 degrees, Cura will automatically generate a support for you. But it looks like we are not at that point yet. But since I have a couple little details on the bottom, I want to make sure that I have adhesion supporter. So what this does is just make sure that we have some smaller shapes on the bottom, and this just makes sure those stick to the build plate while we're printing, otherwise our print will fail. And you can see the little red here. So those are places where Cura thinks we need some supports, so supports are enabled as well. Our infill is a little bit too low, so let's put that up to 20. And this is the size of our layer height, so 1 is probably okay. If you want something a little bit more detailed, you should probably go down to 0.06 millimeters. But since our design is pretty basic, we can probably stick with this. And we're just going to hit slice. It's going to show our time to print, so it's about an hour, and we'll just save that to a file and get it ready for printing. As for our pig, we don't need any supports for this, so I'll just uncheck the support, but we do still need the adhesion method, because you can see these Little hooves are smaller details, and we want to make sure those stick when it's printing. So that's all we need. The layer height and infill are probably good. This is just how thick your infill is inside. If you want something that's 100, that'll take a long time to print, but your print will be very strong. Since this is just a little pig that we're making just to look at, we're probably good with 20. So I'll slice that. It's going to take about an hour and a half to print. And that's it for this week. What I want you to do for next week is look at some objects around you and think about the most basic shapes that make them up. So next week we'll be designing an anchor. If you want to look up a picture of an anchor and just see, are there triangles in it, are there circles, are there boxes, are there cylinders, and just try to break it down into its most basic shapes. So for next week you'll be ready to design our anchors, and I hope I see you then, and see you next week.